Welcome to the Northernlights Podcast, where we talk all things MMA. I'm Dwain, and I'm joined by Mark, as always. Today, we're going to talk about UFC 296, make our predictions for the main card, and question if Paddy Pimblett is over or underrated. But before we get into that, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, as we have brand new episodes every single week. So, Mark, UFC 296 is stacked from the top to the bottom. Do you think this has the potential to be the best card of the year?
On paper, I think it's 100% the best card in the year, providing no one pulls out, everyone's fit and everyone's healthy, everyone turns up, everyone weighs in okay. This could really blow any other card out of the water this year.
Yeah, it really, really could. Like, name value alone, this is a massive card, isn't it? Really, really big. And not just everyone physically turns up, but turns up for the fights. You know, if everyone's got their A games on, this could be amazing. Literally, all the way from the prelims right to the end. This is a stacked card from top to bottom. So, with the main card, though, Mark, which kind of fight are you looking forward to the most?
I'd probably say Paddy versus Tony, just because you feel like either way, something's got to give somewhere. It's Tony's career or Paddy's credibility. What is going to give first? That's probably the one that I'm looking forward to tuning in for the most, even though I don't think it's going to be the best technical fight that you're ever going to see, but it's just a big what if situation. Is there any fights that are jumping out at you that you can't wait to see?
For me, it's there where you said best technical fight, and I think in Roval versus Pantoja, that's the fight I'm looking forward to the most. I think, yeah, like name value wise, who really cares? Division wise, who really cares? But it's just a nice little banger. It's going to be great. I think it's going to be so fast paced, a lot of technique. I think it's going to be a fun fight to watch. You know what I mean? So let's carry on about the main card and go over our predictions. In the main event, we have Leon Edwards defending the welterweight title against Colby Covington. Mark, what's your predictions for this fight and why?
I think Leon's going to come out on top. I could see a finish happening, a TKO, or I can see him edging out a decision. I think Colby's waited way too long. I know cardio is his best friend, but he's nowhere near got the power that Leon Edwards has. What do you think?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, because Leon does have that great KO power, and there's a lot of that KO threat's gonna it's gonna really knock Colby back a little bit. But I am gonna go Colby Covington by decision. I think Leon's not going to be ready for what Colby's got to offer. I think we're going to see Colby do that little walk he does to the middle of the octagon as fast as possible, break that distance. He's going to keep Leon pressed against the cage for the whole fight. And he's just going to chain wrestle him for 5 rounds. And I think he's going to lose 1 round, and it's the first round. And after that, he's going to dominate the rest of the fight.
I think I was thinking about that, and I know that you can't really build an opinion straight off 1 round, but do you remember the Usman and Edwards, the one where Edwards actually, he fairly grappled Kamaru for a good while? That doesn't mean anything, but I'm just going off that in the sense that Edwards does have some grappling skills, quite a lot of them as well. But
yeah, Kamaru
and Colby, especially the number 1 fight, there was 0 grappling. Yeah. We could well be getting a striking fight. Yeah, I'd welcome either, to be honest, because it's great to see, high-level guys going at it, whether it's grappling or striking. But I will say, though, Dwain, that the excitement of this fight for me has minimized. It's not gone completely. I'm still going to tune in, but I don't know. It's just been a long time coming, hasn't it? It sounded good when it got released, and now it's coming. You're like, do any of them really deserve it? Just strip Leon and have these two fight 3 more fights before they even think about a title shot.
It has been long coming. It's a bit too long, but we'll talk about it in a minute. We'll go through our predictions because we'll bring that back up at the end. But I think we're going back to when you were talking about Leon having a lot of success with Usman. The reason he had so much success is because he's a dirty, cheating git. And Colby Covington is going to rat on him immediately. The second his fingers get in the gloves, Colby's snitching without hesitation. I genuinely don't think Leon's going to have any answers to Colby's wrestling. I think it's going to be consistent, heavy-paced, chain wrestling, non-stop. And I just do not think he's going to give him that that movement, that space Leon needs to get off this headshot dead kick, because Leon's not actually got that many finishes on his sort of resume. I think actually him and Colby have the same amount of finishes. I think it's that close. So to sort of talk about Leon as he's this crazy, KO artist. Yeah, he had one big knockout. Let's not pretend he's some huge KO artist. But like you were saying earlier, Mark, when we had Usman versus Colby, two grapplers became a strikers. In this fight, it really, really feels as though it's going to be striker versus grappler. Do you think that Colby is going to be able to deal with Leon's offense? And do you think that Leon is going to be able to deal with Colby's chain wrestling, his consistent chain wrestling?
Yeah, well, I think I'm contradicting myself, but I do believe that Leon and Colby are going to be surprised, because the other one, how much they can hold their own. Colby is not a knockout artist, definitely not. But the amount of the pressure, the pace that he puts on for full 5 rounds, like we said earlier, cardio is his best friend. He can be peppering Leon. He can surprise him. If you're getting jabbed in the face for 25 minutes, just a jab, Dwayne, it's not going to knock you out, but that's going to piss you off. It's going to take its toll on you, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
But I honestly think I disagree with the Leon isn't going to be able to cope with Colby's wrestling. I think he's going to be able to hold his own, even if it's just stuffing a takedown to shock Colby and think, this isn't going to be just as easy as what he thinks. I think both fighters are going to be surprised. I'll just say I'm interested in the fight as a whole, but I think as a main event and for the title, I don't know. I just believe it's been a little bit too long. But in Colby Covington versus Leon Edwards, I'm interested. But as the main event for the last pay-per-view of the year, I think it's been a little bit too long.
Yeah, well, let's go on to another fight then when they come in. Again, another title fight that's not that interesting in the sense of the division's not interesting. But we've got Pantoja versus Royval. This is going to be a fun fight. But Mark, what are your predictions for this fight and why?
I'm hoping that Pantoja can get it done so we can solidify a flyweight champion, to be honest. We can keep one and hopefully bring some life back to this division. There is life there, but, hopefully bring some respect, bring some stature to this division again. The flyweight division has the potential to be a really, really exciting division, as we've been exposed to over the past couple of years, just with other fights that, it is one of those, though. It's similar to another weight class where if they're not in the top 3 or 4, you've probably not really heard of them, unless you're a die-hard fan and you've got no life or job or partner or anything like that, and all you do is just sit there reading through the UFC roster. But I think that, Pantoja can get it done and hopefully, bring some respect to this division again. It's the co-main event. That's good stature enough. But just for name value as well, because the world's going to be watching already. Great for the weight division, right?
Yeah, well, I'm going for Pantoja as well. They've fought before. This is the second time they've fought, and Pantoja submitted Royval. But I'm going to go decision this time. I think Royval's going to be so focused on defending that submission threat. If someone's finished you before in that way, you're going to be so focused on that. And I think he's going to be so focused on defense, he's not going to get any offense off. And I think he's going to lose a 5-round decision. And like you were saying before, if Pantoja wins, and even if Royval wins, where do we go from there? Because Brandon Moreno, he's got a match set up soon. He's likely going to win, and then it's going to be another rematch because he's fought Royval and Pantoja already. So this division it's just the division of rematches, isn't it? And I wonder why is that? Do you think it's because they're all so small and they don't rely necessarily on their physicality? It all becomes just a technical battle. And when it becomes that sort of war, it can go either way quite quickly, can't it? Like if we're both amazing, it can just swap like that so quick, right? Does it make sense?
I think that is a point, especially going off Marino and Figgy, the quadrilogy. But I also think it's because the division isn't that big, not physically, but just name value. Yeah. So the main event fighters, they do just seem to keep doing rematches because it's what sells, isn't it? If you've got if you got Pantoja versus Joe Bloggs, someone who no one's ever heard of in the flyweight division, that doesn't sell, does it?
No.
But with the bigger names, and you're like, oh, and they fought before, and he submitted him. There is all that, the story involved. I hope that we're moving out of this because no one wants to see rematches after rematches. Because I guarantee whoever wins this, just throw Kai Kara France in there and let him have another pop. Like if you get beat by the champion, it doesn't matter because you're going to get another title shot in 6 months anyway. So who really cares?
Yeah, exactly. That's the issue with this division. It doesn't matter if you lose. You're there chomping at the title literally a few months later. But there is some interesting people coming up. You've got Kai Kara France, Manel Cap. You've got that Felipe dos Santos. You've got a lot of people coming up. So hopefully it's going to be a fun division. Fingers crossed, but we'll have to wait and see. Then, Mark, it feels silly even asking you what your prediction for this next fight is. We have Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Wonderboy. What's your prediction for this fight, Mark?
Stephen Thompson, round 1 knockout.
You lying git.
No. It could happen. It could happen, but I don't think so. I really don't think it's going to happen. I think Shavkat, he could well and truly. I think, Shavkat could get a decision. I don't think it's as clear-cut obvious that he's going to get a finish because Wonderboy, he might be slightly aged, but he's still so dangerous. He's one of the slickest strikers the UFC's ever had. And I think, he's going to be well aware. He's got to be. He's got to be able to respect his opponents, doesn't he? Undefeated or not, you're still sitting in front of Wonderboy. Don't matter what his age is. Look at the performances that he had last year against Kevin Holland. He's not an old man. He's still slick. But you've got to be careful. But I do still think that Shavkat's going to do it.
Yeah, I do as well. I think Shavkat is going to get a very dominant win here. I think even a second round submission. I think he's just going to overwhelm Wonderboy, unfortunately, with the grappling. He's going to take him down and just get him finished in the second. And it's a shame because I love Wonderboy and I'd love to see him get it done, but I just don't see it happening. But I will say, Jeff Neal, when he fought Shavkat, Shavkat won quite handedly, but Jeff Neal was giving Shavkat a lot of problems on the feet, a lot. And if Jeff Neal's doing that, if Wonderboy does it to you, could be in a lot of trouble. So he's going to have to play this really, really careful. And it's weird, isn't it, talking about someone who dominated a fight, but going, you have this slight issue there. So it kind of takes something away from Shavkat a little bit. And I worry about when he steps up, is he going to be able to handle that high-level competition and the pressure of these high-level strikers? But, so usually when we do grappler versus striker, you've at least got a puncher's chance. And you always think, right, maybe, just maybe this person could get a flash KO. But Wonderboy's not known for having his finishing power, is he? He's had a couple of TKOs, definitely. But I can't think of any big flash KOs he's had off the top of my head. So that kind of negates it in this fight. But do you think Wonderboy still has a puncher's chance, or do you think it's just completely out of the window?
I don't. I think he's got more than a puncher's chance. And I know it was a long time ago, but he has knocked out like Robert Whittaker when Whittaker used to fight at welterweight. But I think Stephen's best chance really is just pace, pressure, keep pressuring him. Don't forget, he ended up, he beat Kevin Holland, a young prime Kevin Holland who's very good all round. Made him quit in the stool because he broke his hand. So granted, that might not be Stephen's doing, but you understand what I'm saying.
So we've got to hope that Wonderboy's chin holds out, then Shavkat breaks his hand on his face, and Wonderboy can win that
He's going to use his skull to break his wrist, is what he's going to do.
Matt, put a bet on that. Put a bet on. What are the odds of it on that?
I think he does have a chance, but obviously Jeff Neal is known for his boxing. Steve Thompson's mainly known for his kickboxing. So if he can creep one in, he'll be the master, like Adesanya, of like a question mark kick, that kind of stuff. So I think he could well pull it off, but my heart's saying Stephen Thompson, my wallet is saying Shavkat Rakhmonov round 1 knockout.
Either way, it's going to be a fun fight, and I can't wait. But sort of talking about an older man coming up against a young contender, we have Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett. Mark, what's your prediction for this fight and why?
We have mentioned this in a previous video. I believe Paddy is going to be able to submit Tony, maybe even in the second round, something like that. It's a big what if factor either way of this fight goes, but I think this is going to be Tony's send off, and I think this is going to be where the diehard Tony fans even call it a day, because they've been wittering on since Gaethje took his soul. They've been wittering on that Tony's going to come back, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, and we haven't seen a thing of it. I think this is going to be where they swallow the pride and just admit defeat.
Yeah, I think so as well. I'm going exactly the same prediction as you. I'm going Paddy Pimblett, round 2 submission. I think the big problem with Tony is he used to be a great fighter, but he's just not that anymore. His fight IQ is diminished. His physicality is diminished. I think he's going to put his head in Paddy's arms for free. He's going to get choked out, just like he did with Nate Diaz and just the way he did with Bobby Green. I think the writing's on the wall. And I'm surprised that so many people are still picking Tony after this 6-fight losing streak. It's like you were saying, I just feel like Tony fans are clinging on to something that's not been there for a long, long time. But we'll talk about that in a minute once we've gone through the predictions for this fight. We've also got probably one of the most hated men on the roster, Ian Garry. He is going to be fighting Vicente Luque. Mark, what's your predictions for this fight and why?
It's a quick turnaround for Gary, isn't it? He was only battering Neil Magny a couple of weeks ago, it seems. I think Gary, but he's got his work cut out for him. Vicente Luque is no joke. And he's got to be so careful, especially if Vicente can get him down. Then he's just going to have to grind. This is a good test for him. I kind of want Ian Garry to be able to do it. Whether I like or dislike him doesn't matter. But just to throw some new names and contenders up the top of that division. Vicente Luque has always been floating around this kind of area, win, lose, or draw, and I think that Ian Garry could be a big, big name at the top of the welterweight division.
Yeah, he really, really could. And I'm the same as you. Even though I'm not a big fan of Ian Garry, I want him to win, because if Luque wins, so what, right? Where does this go? Luque's been this mid-card guy for a long, long time. He's not jumping up anytime soon, and then he'll probably lose his next fight anyway. Nobody cares. Whereas if Garry gets this done, it projects him up as a big name here. And I think I'm going to go Ian Garry decision. I don't think he's finishing Luque, because I think Luque is going to be really focused on a grappling heavy game. He's going to just keep trying to get him down, but I think Ian Garry will pepper him up, but I don't think he'll get him finished. Because we've seen it before. Ian Garry's not bad on the ground, but you can tell it's where he's most worried. Like when he fought Neil Magny, he did not engage at all on the floor. He made it just get up, Neil, just get up. And Luque's got some good grappling. He's got a couple of submissions under his belt. So if he can get hold of Garry, that's it. He's done for, isn't he? But talking about Garry and sort of this big name, it seems such a shame because I hated Ian Garry and then I really liked him, and I've come back to hating him again. And it feels like that for a lot of fans, right? It feels like he's now becoming one of the most disliked fighters on the roster. Do you think, Mark, he's kind of shot himself in the foot, especially the way he acted after the Neil Magny fight and the build-up to it?
It's the build-up during and after the Neil Magny fight. He didn't do himself any favours at all, did he? I think because you just think it was just so unjust, just unwarranted. Like, it wasn't as if there was bad blood or anything. It's so obvious that it's an act and just trying to create something, trying to get people to talk about him. I think the way that he could probably save it is maybe win, lose, or draw with Vicente Luque. Just be as cool, calm, and collective, Just be fine with whatever, respectful, all that. And I think you can win back some fans. I don't think you'd really care. No one really does bother that much about, if they're universally loved. Obviously, it might be nice to be, but at the same time, if there's such a contrast in your rise and now all of a sudden people hate you and you want to pull it back, I think he's just going to have to, he's going to have to show up in his next performance as, not an idiot.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? And you say, maybe Ian Garry doesn't care, but he's like put his Twitter as private and stuff, and he's been getting a lot of hate on there, and people have been giving his wife abuse and stuff. And like, I don't want to get into all of that kind of stuff. It doesn't overly interest me.
To be fair, yeah, there's a bit of a Will Smith situation going on there. It seems to be.
Colby Covington is going to have a field day. Honestly, this is going to be a scary, scary press conference. But I think fighters like Ian Gary, they sort of realize how strong the wind blows at the top of the mountain, right? It's really difficult up there. And if you take slightly the wrong footing, you're done for. So he's got to play it careful, because if you want to be a big name, you have to be likable. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. This sport is entertainment first and foremost. If we don't like a fighter, we're not interested, we're not tuning in. That's just the way this game works. You have to be liked, or at least disliked so much that people are interested in watching you fight. Whereas I feel like it'll get to that point that people just not be interested at all, and they're not bothered. And you won't get that name value if you're not liked, I don't think.
Well, controversial figures, such as, say, even Conor or something, some people tune in because they love him. Some people tune in because they want to see him lose.
Yeah.
Which is beneficial either way. Hate mail is better than no mail. But if you're in that Bilal Muhammad turf, where you're just like, who's tuning in for you? You're the most unmemorable, forgettable fighter. Look, you're even turning away now. You're bored out of your mind. I've just
literally, he's terrible. It's just, it's not remember the name. It's forget the fight with Bilal. It's so dull. Who cares? And it's not enough, is it? You need to build a fan base, because Dana White is not going to give you a title shot. If you're not getting people talking about you and people aren't interested, you ain't getting up to the top of the division. That's just the way it is. Dana does not care about the rankings. Does this fight sell? Yes or no? If the answer's no, I ain't putting it on. He's not bothered. But that's the main card out of the way. Mark, is there any fights on the prelims that you're interested in?
Oh, 100%. My boy Cody Garbrandt is back. But I'm not going to hold my breath, though, because Cody seems to be, the past few years, he's in and out. He's not always turning up. But he's against Brian Kelleher. I hope I've said that right.
I'm not sure.
That's a fight to tune in for. I hope Cody Garbrandt still has the speed, footwork, and insane confidence that he can bring to the UFC if he turns up. And there is another one, Dwayne. Another one, a replacement. We have Josh Emmett, the fighting Falmer, against Bryce Mitchell. This is a fight I didn't know I really wanted to see.
Yeah.
You sent me the replacement fight that Bryce Mitchell's stepping in. I was like, gee, this is a really, really good fight. Tune in for this. This is going to be great. What you were saying earlier, grappler versus striker, Emmett has got some power in his hands. Mitchell could turn this fighting Falmer into a twister submission and get the win. Who knows what's going to happen? Tune in, see out, find out.
Yeah, I literally cannot wait. Bryce Mitchell, God's warrior, he's going to come in with his Bible. He's going to have these holy powers. And then he's going to do a nice round of Kumbaya at the end of the fight. And I'm just...
What are you talking about, Dwayne?
Holy Bryce. Everybody knows it, Mark. He's this new guy. He's come out. He's been blessed by God now. Yeah, he's come out. He said it himself. But it's a shame that Bryce isn't on the press conference, because I love this sort of character he's sort of developed now. He just makes me laugh so much. Character / maybe he's actually mentally insane. One or the other. I'm excited to see him, and I can't wait. But we've spoke a little bit about the main event earlier, Mark, and with sort of Leon and Colby, it feels now that we've waited such a long time. Do you feel like it's taken the shine off this main event and this card?
I really do. As it is the main event, the welterweight division is a huge division, right? But I feel like it's slowed down so much that the momentum that we had coming off Colby's last fight with Masvidal last March, I believe, and Leon's last fight against Usman, for one reason or another, both of them haven't really been too active. And it's slowed down the momentum so much that you feel like, what, this is our main event? It's an interesting fight, but this is our main event to close out the year. Being a greedy fan, though, what else can we expect? It is the welterweight division. But at least now, hopefully, there's no more hold up. Whoever wins this, whoever comes out on top, hopefully that just opens it up for new challenges. But honestly, I can't imagine Leon to do that. He's never been known. He doesn't fight very often. Never has. Colby, I know it's part of his gimmick, but I think he genuinely does believe that he is like this big time A-lister player where he wants to get 100 million a fight, whatever. I've just made that up. And I do, but and you know, like anyone else who comes up like, no, we don't talk about bums in this. We don't talk about bums in this division. What are you talking about? He's the number one contender.
Yeah.
He almost does that. And it's a clever way of picking who you want to fight next. And that's what I think anyway. Do you think this is lackluster?
I agree 100%. I think we've taken some real shine off this fight. It felt as though we should have seen these guys fight 6 months ago. You know, it's just we've waited too long now. And like you were saying, it's not just killed the momentum of this fight, it's killed the momentum of a whole division. It's killed it so much that now Shavkat and Ian Gary have caught up with everyone else. We're going to be looking at these guys at the top of this division, and all these other guys have now just dropped down. Bilal, Gilbert Burns, they've not been fighting actively. So it's really tricky. And yeah, I think it's lose-lose for fans here. I think whoever wins on Saturday, they're not going to make the division active. I think that's the big problem is no matter what, they're both going to wait another 6, 7, 8, even a year to fight. And it's just such a shame. But it's tricky with Colby because I don't know whether he's just been holding off on fights because he knows, right, if I wait, I'll get a title shot. Whereas if he is the champion, maybe he'll go, right, I'll be more active now. I need to cement my legacy. Because if he doesn't, he'll just be remembered as the guy who lost to Usman twice. You know, that's what it'll go down as. He has to come out strong and cement his legacy and prove that he's the champion and why he's there. But I also think, sorry, Karen.
No, I was just going to say that's such an important point there. That if he doesn't come out strong, he will just be remembered as the guy who lost to Kamaru Usman twice. Great fights, but you know that's it. And you think it doesn't, regardless of Damian Maia, RDA, Robbie Lawler, they aren't exactly relevant at the top of the division anymore, so it doesn't matter anymore.
No.
If he's still going out strong and he's still saying this is his prime of his career, he needs to prove it. If he loses this, what happens? You know?
Who does he fight? You know, like, where does he go from there? Yeah, Bilal. Oh, God. That is just so boring. Don't talk to me about Bilal. I'm not interested. But because there's been so much shine taken off this main event, it feels like we've been really looking at other fights now. It feels in some ways like right at the top of the episode, I said to you, Matt, I said, what fight are you looking forward to the most? And you said Tony versus Paddy. And it feels weird that that's the biggest fight on the card, right? And it feels like we've taken a lot of shine on there. So, like, you know, we've said before, though, this is kind of a lose-lose situation for Paddy, and it puts him in quite an awkward spot now, doesn't it? Because where does he go from there? If he wins, who cares? If he loses, it's the end of his career. But, Mark, my question for you is, do you think Paddy Pimblett is over or underrated as a fighter?
It would be easy for me to say overrated, but I don't really believe that's the case. Because you look at the rankings don't mean anything, but let's just go off them for a moment. So he's unranked. And the fights that he's been doing, if he wasn't such a big name, we wouldn't even be paying. We'd just say, oh yeah, he's doing all right. Yeah, he's on a bit of a win streak. But it's because he's such a big name, you can't help that. You know, he's that popular. Whether it's the accent, the floppy Beatles hair, all this kind of stuff. When he was throwing up in Cage Warriors, all that kind of stuff. Why people know him? Oh, he's that guy. So there's that many eyes on him. He's still just learning. In the sense that he's only 26 or something. So I don't know if I'd call him overrated in the sense, but it's just more there is a hype train and you think slow it right down yet. We don't know yet, you know. So I don't know if it class as overrated. Do you get what I mean?
No, I do. I agree with you exactly. Because I actually think now, with the place that Paddy's in, I think he's a little bit underrated now. I feel fans have turned on him so quickly. They're all talking about him as though he's washed. He's only 28. He's a young kid. You know, he's got a long time left. And if he can make some improvements, I think we could see something special out of this. Or he'll just flounder in the mid card. So we'll have to wait and see. But I just don't think it's fair on Paddy to give him so much abuse because because he's not as good as you were hoping, or if he's famous, he's famous. It's just the way it is. Get over it. That's what I think anyway.
I think when we've said it's a lose-lose, the only way I can see that if Paddy can get away, if he beats Tony, is to drop the act of the this is light work and fight of the night, all this kind of stuff, because especially after his last performance, that's how fickle fans are. They can just turn on you exactly like that, because he was loved up until then. But then you got, and like you said, on his wedding day, you got people calling him out. Oh, you lost to Jared Gordon. Like, oh, leave off it. Seriously. But if he goes over, I'll give him that. He's been respectful up until now, because you've got to be very careful. Because like you said, Tony Ferguson fans, they're weird, to be honest. They're like weird.
They're El Kakui as well.
They're like Reek with Ramsay in Game of Thrones. Just like, oh, good Tony Ferguson fans. Wild. But I honestly think that, because he's been respectful up until now, he's saying, regardless of the last 6 fights, he's still El Kakui, he's still Tony Ferguson. He remembered watching him growing up. Rather than spinning round with Molly McCann on his shoulders and spinning his whatever around and all that kind of stuff, if he remembers where he is, I think he might get out with a little bit of credibility.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you're right there. If he comes out humble and doesn't act like the way he did in his last fight, we could see a resurgence of him. But let's take a quick look at Paddy's fights, because that's the thing, isn't it? Out of his last 4, he's had 3 finishes, and people talk about him as though he's some terrible fighter. It's like, what is going on? I think UFC fans can be just so fickle sometimes. They're so quick to turn. But like we said, let's look at his previous fights. When he came out and fought Luigi, I think he got, was it a second round finish or a first round finish? I don't remember. Either way, it was quick. Yeah, his debut fight.
Second, I think.
Yeah, it was nice and quick either way. And we could see how good he was as a grappler, but he seemed to have some issues with his boxing. He kept putting his chin in the air, and he did get caught. When Paddy came into his next fight, did you expect to see some big improvements from that chin and sort of fix those flaws?
Yeah, the way I saw his debut fight was he rushed in, and then when he gets clipped, you're like, oh, nearly. And so then it just seems like, right, back to the drawing board. Let's just calm down here. Do you remember the famous, like, I'm a Scouser, we don't get knocked out, and Bisping straight away, well, you almost got knocked out in the first round. Let's not forget that. But yeah, I think it was good for him to go back to the drawing board and, take some real adjustments and take everything a little bit slower.
Yeah, definitely. And then he came back and he fought Vargas, and he still kept getting caught though. And then he fought Jordan Levitt, and I think this is here where we saw that Paddy, had some little holes in his grappling as well. Paddy did get the finish, but he seemed to be struggling quite a bit. And do you think that kind of put the writing on the wall that Paddy's perhaps not as good as we were all expecting him to be?
Well, it's a strange one, because obviously his debut, the world was watching because he's a big name. After that, the Levitt fight.
Yeah.
Don't forget that was UFC London. So the world was behind him there as well. Yeah, so everything's so anticipated. You could almost argue that he was like set up to failure as soon, because he gets projected right up until the main card, doesn't he? In an American audience where people, it's enemy, it's a hostile environment, So you could argue that, but yeah, there was a few. But then again, maybe that's just testament to the high level of skills that are in the UFC. It's not a lack of skills by one fighter. It's just testament to the wide range of skills in the entire UFC. That could be the case.
Yeah, and it's like when I was talking about Shavkat earlier, and it's like, right, or Jeff Neal gave him slightly more trouble than I expected it to be. So he's not that good, and it's just, we're all so fickle out going, right, these fighters are perfect all the time, so they're crap. It's not the way it works, is it? You can, all fighters get caught. They all get in trouble sometimes. I think it's testament to show that how good Paddy actually is. Even when he's get caught, even when he's struggling on the ground, he can still get the win, and in quite spectacular fashion. Though a fight people think he didn't get the win in, he came out and fought Jared Gordon. Mark, do you think this was the real final nail in the coffin for Paddy and sort of this wild hate he got, and whether, perhaps he's not as good a fighter as we were all hoping him to be?
Well, again, I'm not sure if it was his fault entirely. I seem to remember a fight backing out on there, so he was the core main event. Jared Gordon and Paddy Pimblett, two unranked guys, are the core main event.
It was
Can't remember exactly.
Glover and Yuri pulled out.
Right, yeah, there you go. Well, so like obviously the world is watching again.
Yeah.
And I watched Michael Bisping's breakdown on Paddy Pimblett with the Jared Gordon fight, and I agree with him entirely. He says if he didn't do the all, I still think I won and all this kind of, you can watch that back. I swear, how the hell do you think Paddy won? You can go off technicalities and stuff, but it's such a far reach to make a claim that Paddy won that fight. Well, I swear it was just because of the hype train.
I think he did win, to be honest.
Really?
I do think he did win that fight, but not from anything special. I think if you look at the statistics, he did get more strikes in that third round, but it's because Jared Gordon was so inactive. He was just holding him up there, not doing anything. So Paddy did get more strikes in, and that's why he just scraped it. But it's one of those where it really could have just turned 50-50 for me. I can see where people go, I don't see how Paddy won, but I don't see how anyone can say Jared won either. What did Jared do to win that fight?
To be fair, he clipped him with six big left hooks. Yeah. Right.
Of course, but this is a round by round basis, isn't it? It's not based off the whole fight, That's the problem. That's the big difference. And it's, for me, that's why I can't think, right, Jared definitely won either. It was such a flip-flop fight, and I can see, okay, Paddy won because he did get more strikes off in that final round. And if Jared had just stepped his foot on the gas, he'd have won quite handedly, I think.
It's a strange one because you go, well, it goes back to that grey area of judging again. Because you go, is it damage that trumps all then? How many times have we heard that? But when the shoe's on the other foot and it doesn't quite fit that narrative, someone goes, well, it's the amount of strikes. And you're like, we need solidified rules or like at least to hold judges accountable. I swear that you could hold judges accountable, or even introduce two more, have 5 judges. Mind you, that's two more chances to get it wrong, but you understand what the logic was behind that. That fight was just a fight, to be honest, and it was only because it was in front of the world stage that so many people was outraged at the decision. If that was the early prelims on a fight night, we still wouldn't be talking about it.
You're 100% right. And it's what you said earlier, didn't you? You said it's because of Paddy's name value. That's why so many people are paying attention to that. Nobody would have cared. Literally, we wouldn't have even batted an eye. Yeah, whatever. A crappy decision on a prelim. Who's bothered, right? And, and to give Paddy a little bit of credit, he did damage his ankle right at the start of that first round. And he still managed to give Jared Gordon some problems and do pretty well through the fight. You think, oh, well, for me, it's not an excuse. If you come out and you get injured, that's part of the fight. Get over it. Yeah. But, I'm just saying, a full healthy Paddy may have done a little bit better. But with Paddy Mark, do you think that he can ever sort of fulfill the potential of his career, or do you think he'll just sort of flounder in the mid-card forever?
No, I think he definitely does have the ability, but when we compare Paddy to, say, the likes of Michael Chandler, it's like man and boy, isn't it? Quite literally, that's how it seems. And you just think, how's he going to cope with the monsters that are at the top of this division? Right now, Tony Ferguson, name value is great for him, but not going to be great in the fans' eyes, if that makes sense. No. Great for his stock anyway, for diehard Paddy Pimblett fans. But I don't know really. I think this next fight will tell. Ask me after 296 and I'll be able to answer you.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. And that's the thing, is it? We can see where Paddy is after this and what his potential is. But let's turn this on its head now, Mark. Let's look at Tony Ferguson. Do you think he's over or underrated as a fighter?
Oh, it's a cruel question, Dwain. I'm going to say overrated, if I'm totally honest, because you've got to look at the full career, don't you? Yeah. Impressive win streak, but, where are those fighters now? What happened to them? I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to pass it over to you because I can already feel the hatred.
Yeah, well, yeah, you might feel the hatred, but it's coming to me as well, Matt, because I agree. I think Tony Ferguson is overrated as well. I think if you look at his career as a whole, yes, he had a fantastic little run, but you can't ignore a 6-fight losing streak. You just can't do it. I think with Tony, rather than looking at Paddy in sort of individual fights, it's easy to break Tony down into two separate fighters almost. You've got 12-fight win streak Tony, which puts him in the top 10 of the most fights in a row in the UFC. And then 6-fight losing Tony, who puts him, I think, second for the most fights lost in the UFC.
BJ Penn, I think that's the first
he's
one.
Number 7. Yeah, he's number 7. Number 1 with 7. So Tony, if he loses on Saturday, will be tied for first. So how can you have these big, huge disparity in records, And it's a real shame, isn't it? So first, let's talk about his wins then, and let's go a bit of a positive look at it. So his notable wins are like Kevin Lee, Anthony Pettis, RDA, Cowboy via blowing his nose, and as impressive as Tony's sort of win streak was, do you think the caliber of fighters he fought is enough to warrant the high standard that people put him to?
There's a yes and no answer to that. I think both of them could be justified, because imagine being a Tony Ferguson fan during that win streak. You think he's going to the top, he's going to get it all done. Anthony Pettis is no joke. RDA, he was a champion. Cowboy, everyone loves Cowboy, but he was great once of a day. But again, the same thing happened to Cowboy, didn't it? Got two versions of that fighter as well. So you could argue with that. I can see why people want to hold him in high regard, but I do not see how people can still claim that he is still 12-fight win streak Tony. No. You've got to be able to just call it a day, don't you? I've used this analogy so many times. Take old Yeller behind the sheds and put the bullet between his eyes now. It's done. It's over. He's not that same fighter.
Yeah, he isn't, unfortunately. But even though it's tricky, with Tony, he was this great 12-fight win streak fighter, really high level, but Tony never became champion. And he missed out on fighting Khabib and Conor. Do you think, Mark, he'd have beat either of those guys to become champion anyway?
I do not see how he beat Khabib. Looking back now as well, there was a guy where I used to train. He said Tony Ferguson takes that fight, because this was one of the many times that fight was arranged, And I'd never seen it at the time, but more decisively now, I think Khabib would have battered him. Conor, I could see more of a chance for him, but I could still just see Conor being able to slice through him, But at the same time, Tony's chin, aside from Michael Chandler finding that point, he could take a pounding, takes more of a pounding than Tito's wife. He's a bit disgusting, really.
What is this, Northern Lights After Dark, Matt? Disgusting, vile.
I don't really know. Tito hasn't been relevant for however long, has it?
I know, he's just catching strays anyway. But I'm thinking the same as you, to be honest. With Tony Ferguson, I think his fans are lucky that he never fought Khabib and Conor. I think Khabib would have mauled him. He would have literally destroyed him. And I think Conor would have found his chin and just kept repeating it on loop. And I don't know if he'd have knocked him out, but he'd have kept finding it and he'd have kept just peppering him up. I think it could have been very similar to Conor versus Nate too. That sort of, right, I'll keep whacking him, he'll get back up, I'll keep whacking him, and we'll just get that on loop over and over and over again.
I don't think you'd have had the running away with Tony Ferguson, though. I don't think it would have been needed, to be honest. I've got a theory that I think that why people love him so much is because he's so unorthodox, he's so wild. His training, his fighting styles, everything, he just seems so... It's so wiry, loose, and it's so unusual that people like, oh, who's this guy? He's cool. And maybe that could be it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just sounding like a hater against people's favorite fighter, but I don't really care. I don't like the guy. I don't see the big appeal. So why do I care?
I like watching Tony fight. Like you were saying, he's got a very interesting style. He throws out some wild stuff. But I've never been that big Tony fan, ever. I always thought it was so weird in the press conferences. I've never enjoyed much of what he's got to say. He's not the fighter for me, really. But so let's move on then, Mark, to version 2 of Tony. 6-fight losing streak, and 4 of those have been a finish. Mark, what do you attribute being the real downfall of Tony? What do you think it is?
I'm not sure, and I don't think anyone bar Tony would be able to figure that out. David Goggins might be having quite the go at it right now, but we'll see how that goes. Because obviously it was Justin Gaethje in 2020. Aside from one uppercut at the end of the second round, Gaethje, it's like he took something from Tony that no one knew could be taken. It was a strange, and mercifully it got stopped. And if you remember, the last punch that was thrown was a jab, but Tony reacted to it in a strange way where you think, yeah, that's justified. Let's stop this. After that, was it? It was Oliveira, was it? Oliveira or Beneil, then Chandler, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Because all 4 of those guys have nailed him. But then look, there was moments in those fights, but moments aren't enough to get it done. Evidently, it was so, the offense to defense was so out of sync that I can't really determine what it is that he lost. But have you any closer? Have you got any theories?
For me, I guess it's a combination of multiple things. One, he got older. I mean, everyone knows that. He's an older guy. His fight IQ is not there. His physicality is not there. But I also think it's a real step up in competition. I think when you beat people like, Kevin Lee and like Cowboy and RDA, who are just really sort of hit and miss fighters. 1 week they're winning, 1 week they're losing. Then you're going up against the top, like Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Beneil, maybe not Beneil anymore, but when you're losing to that caliber of fighter, it's fine. That's these guys are the best of the best. It's why it's such a tough division. And I think he just finally took that big step up in competition, and he just couldn't handle it. He's not that high elite level fighter that people think he is. And I think that's simply what it comes down to. And then he just continued to deteriorate, because then when he fought Nate Diaz and Bobby Green, like, honestly, the Bobby Green fight, even for me, even though I'm not a Tony fan, it was heartbreaking to see. I went, well, Bobby Green's crap, Tony Ferguson should do him in. And Bobby battered him from pillar to post. I couldn't believe, like, literally, it felt as though Tony, it wasn't even necessarily his physicality let him down, it was his mind. It was just like, what are you doing? You're doing such stupid stuff. I didn't get it.
Well, I think that's maybe why he's got David Goggins in for a mindset like reassessment. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't think cardio is his problem." You're like, "No, you don't get it. It's his mindset, his approach to this new situation."
Yeah.
But imagine, Dwayne, if Tony does beat Paddy.
No matter what, win, lose, or draw, he has to be his final fight. I do not want to see Tony fight again now. And the problem is, if he wins, it's going to give him too much confidence, and he's going to re-sign, and it's going to be just a massacre. I don't want to see it happening. But overall, I think it's lose-lose for both guys in this. I think it's a fight that's going to be fun to watch. The build-up's going to be really fun. But if Paddy wins, who cares? If Tony wins, I just think it's going to set his career down an even worse path. But I do think that's all we've got time for. Thank you for tuning in. If you can like, comment, and subscribe, it really does help us out.